you see Tesla trying to make self-driving cars, and it is so difficult to make a car stay on the road and not run over the other cars. So you think of the intricacies of picking crops and planting crops and all that stuff. There's a lot that goes into that. That has got to be an incredibly difficult problem. I am curious what Star Wars robot in the Star Wars canon would make the best farming robot. Especially with farming, there's always something more that you can do. And in Stardew, there's always something else that you need to be doing. You need to go catch the fish, you need to go to the mine, you need to do whatever. You never have enough energy or daytime.
Hello and welcome to Talk Ag to Me, the podcast dedicated to improving ag literacy around the globe. I'm your host, Brennan Black, and in today's episode, we're going to have another consumer conversation with our good friend Patrick. Patrick, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me again today. I've been looking forward to this one.
Yeah, me too. So in the last episode...
Last time on Talk Ag to Me, where we last left our heroes...
we were talking about all sorts of different things. We kind of had a conversation that went in a lot of different directions, which is good. That's what I'm hoping for, is to have a lot of different trains of thought going around this subject, because that means that our guest is actually thinking about it. So we had a few questions at the end of the last episode that weren't fully answered, and it's just because time restrictions for an episode, you don't want to talk for 10 hours about the same topic. So and it was getting kind of late on Patrick's end, so I offered for him to come back and do a second episode, and here we are. So we have a few questions that I know that Patrick here wanted to get to, so we're going to address those as well, but we're just kind of do what we were doing last time and just talk ag. That's kind of what we do here. So Patrick, you said you had some... Yeah, that it sure is. You said you had some questions for me?
Yeah, you piqued my interest at the very end, and I don't think that was totally fair when you just threw out the casual robots question. I'm like, whoa, back that up, sir. Robots. So I wrote down this question, and I just have it literally in my notes. It says robots with a bunch of question marks. So I'm going to ask that general, and I have some more specific questions. But robots. How do those fall into agriculture? I mean, I can imagine some scenarios, but tell me what you know.
So robots are a very interesting aspect of agriculture, and you're not the only person I've had this conversation with where I've mentioned robots and their eyes light up and they say, "Wait a second, you say robots?" And so it's not an uncommon reaction, and I think the reason for that is because agriculture as an industry is often thought of as very simplistic, like less technologically advanced in a sense. It's very you go out and you collect your crops and you milk your cow, and that's about it. But there is a lot of technological advancement in agriculture that is often overlooked. And so the ag industry is actually one of, if not the most technologically advanced industries in the entire world, because they're producing our food. They need to have the most state-of-the-art technology capable of doing that task. And so where the robots come in, there's a lot of different new technologies that agriculturalists, that farmers are using to produce their food more effectively. And so I'll give you a few examples. And just disclaimer, when I say robots, I don't mean like Wall-E driving through a field collecting corn with just his hands and he puts in a little bucket kind of thing. It's slightly more...
I've lost interest. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking.
No, it's slightly more complicated than that. I mean, they do operate very similarly. Basically, it's by robot. I'll just give you a very simplistic definition. I just mean a mechanical device that is operated by some form of artificial intelligence. And so, because there are machines that we use in the agriculture industry that are either man-operated or they're operated remotely from an office somewhere, and I guess you can consider those robots in a sense the same way you consider like a toy robot a robot, because it's controlled by a human. But there are certain artificially intelligent machines that we use in the agricultural industry as well. And I think that's kind of more along the lines of what you were imagining when I said robot. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I imagine. Well, maybe I'm simple, but whenever you're talking remote-controlled agricultural equipment harvesting crops, I immediately say, okay, this is magic. This is not exactly what I imagine when I think of agriculture. It's like some person in a nice air-conditioned house, picking corn or however he's whatever he's doing. Like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, definitely, and that's kind of one of my most favorite aspects of having this conversation with people who aren't as familiar with agriculture, because they have such a like a not to say a lack of understanding, but like they miss that part of agriculture, and that there's an entire technological aspect that is massively important to the production of our food. And so, just to give an example, so there are robots, I guess you could say, they perform a lot of different tasks on the farm, and some of the ones I like to more specifically name are, they have robots that pick food, very specific food, because not all food can be picked mechanically, because they're either too delicate, or there's a certain way you have to pick it that won't damage the tree or the fruit, so they have to pick it with manual labor. But there's a lot of foods. Excuse me. There's a lot of foods that are picked by machine. So they have robots that go out there and they can harvest this crop off of the plant without having to harm the plant, without having to harm the land around the plant. They just go in, they get the food, they put it in a tray or whatever, and they take it out without there having to be any manual labor involved. There's also drone. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I wanted to. So that's fascinating to me in that, okay, if you have, I'm imagining. So whenever I'm imagining robots and machine sorting and that kind of thing, I'm thinking of still a pretty mechanical process, in that you say, let's say corn. Let's use corn as an example. You get a bunch of corn plants. You maybe cut them off at the base, and then you shove it into a machine that sorts it by weight, or by maybe a certain hardness of object can make it through, so it cuts all the it automatically cuts all the my terminology is gonna be all messed up, but it cuts all the green stuff off of off of the corn, left with only the corn with the sheath on it. Am I making sense? But you're saying something goes up and down the rows and picks the corn, for example. I mean, whatever plant that is. Insert crop here.
So it's dependent on the crop. So corn is a crop that's very difficult to pick just right off of the crop and not have to actually chop up the corn stalk. So it's very dependent on the plant. I'm not sure that there's any machines that can just directly pick corn as a cob straight off the stalk without having to destroy the stalk in the process. But I know that there are crops, especially in the tree industry, with nuts and with some forms of fruit and other tree, or like kind of more, I guess, more permanent crop styles that are
like apple trees or cherry trees or
exactly.
Whatever.
So like there's some of those that are a lot easier to pick mechanically, because the tree's going to grow more. Whereas a corn stalk, if you pick that corn off, it's not going to grow any more corn. So you have to basically restart. So there's certain crops that it works for a lot better than others. But
sure.
In the same sense that machine that's designed to harvest corn can harvest corn autonomously, and it can do it a lot more effectively than a human can, more often than not. So
let's use the tree as an example. I wanted to. Sorry if I keep stopping you mid thought, but I'm just, as I'm grabbing things in my head. So I'm thinking of something autonomous. So you're not saying something shakes the apple tree until all the apples fall out into a bucket. Something is actually picking an apple. Does it pick them an apple at a time? I would think that efficiency would be very difficult to have a robot that could recognize this is an apple. I want to pull the apple out of the tree in such a way that doesn't bruise the apple, and do this many, many times, in a second, to such that it's quick and efficient. Because also these robots cannot be cheap. So I would think it would take a while for your return on investment to pay off. And again, Apple may not be the best example, but a crop like that where something automated picks the crop.
You're starting to get into the kind of the biggest issue and solution to agriculture right now and that's, how do we make this technology so efficient but also affordable that it can be actively used in the agricultural industry effectively? And so that is something that is kind of up for debate right now, because there's a lot of technologies that are up and coming that are that precise. They could, maybe not necessarily with apples, because a lot of those softer fruits are very difficult to pick mechanically, but they actually are designing fruit that can harvest like grapes and smaller fruit like certain berries, and they can do it mechanically. I'm not exactly sure how they do it from a technological perspective, but they can do it in a way that doesn't damage the fruit nearly as much as it would with previous technology. So there's definitely up and coming technology. There are some out there that can harvest. So we have like shakers that for like tree nuts. So walnuts, pistachios, almonds. We have shakers that go out there and they actually shake the tree until the nuts fall off, and it doesn't damage the tree at all.
Okay.
So,
I was kind of joking when I said that. No, okay.
No, that's actually a thing. So if you're ever in an area where they have a lot of tree-based foods, especially in the nut industry, and you see they almost look like solar panels, and they just go on either side of a tree and they just shake the tree literally, and they have a little compartment that opens up, and all of the nuts just fall into this compartment, and they store it in the machine, take it back, and then that's when they put them in the packages and send them off to processors.
That's super cool.
Right.
Does the robot shake one tree at a time? I mean, let me phrase. Do you have to set the robot up to shake a tree, and then it shakes the tree until it's done, and then you have to take the robot to the next tree, or is it smart enough to keep going until it has shaken all the trees by itself? Can you just do it like a Roomba, set it and forget it, and it just goes and shakes all the trees?
So I'm going to say that. So I'm no expert on the subject by any means. I don't want to come off that I am, but I think that.
You can speak in general terms. I'll accept that.
I'm not entirely sure if the shakers are controlled autonomously yet. I know that those are driven by people. I'm sure that there are autonomous versions of these shakers. I'm not fully positive on that, so I don't want to say that and say, yeah, there's shakers that drive themselves. There's shakers that are run by AI, but I'm pretty sure there are. But there are
either way, that's super cool.
Right, and so there's other machines. There's tractors and there's harvesters and there's machines that like apply pesticides and that sort of thing. And they are all programmed, like you were saying. You can like a Roomba. You map out basically a pattern through the rows that it has to go through, and it just knows to do that. You don't have to go to one tree and then go program it to go to the next tree. It just kind of has that path already set out for it. So it's a little bit more difficult with machines that are so precise that they have to basically like move a certain distance and then shake, and then move a certain distance and shake. But it is possible, and we have seen it done with certain technologies in certain industries.
Okay, you're kind of leading up to my next question, because you had mentioned before that there's some debate on what the best path forward is. Do you see it being more worthwhile having 2 or 3 general purpose robots? I'm thinking of, say, an automated tractor that maybe has instead of having a front end loader, having an arm that can also pick fruit. Having an all purpose robot, or having maybe lots of specialized cheaper robots, something that's just a shaker, or just a picker, or just a something that sprays pesticide, etc.
See, that's an interesting question. So here in my hometown of Tulare, I live in Tulare, California. We have what's called the World Ag Expo, and that's a massive, I guess you can kind of call it a trade show, but it's not really a trade show. It's kind of different. But basically, farmers and agriculturalists and technologists and scientists from all over the world come here, and we have this massive convention basically for a week long. And it's where they basically showcase brand new technology in the ag industry. They show off new tractors. They show off, like, they had it's kind of, I still don't know how it works, because I don't think they're in production. Like, I don't think they're in mass production yet, but they have like basically an electric forklift, which was interesting to say the least. But anyways, they have a bunch of technology that they show off at these expos, and you're starting to see a lot of that kind of stuff of maybe not all purpose robot vehicles, but they are starting to get more and more generalized, and because of it's the capitalist effect, because they're producing more of them, the prices are going down. And so, because a large issue we're having right now in the ag industry is that farmers just can't afford this technology. But like you were mentioning earlier, the return on investment is kind of bleak for a lot of farmers. Like, when they buy it puts them so far underwater that they have a hard time seeing a purpose in buying it in the first place. But
the new tractors and stuff are just ridiculously expensive.
Oh yeah,
I mean, it's insane how much. You can easily pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for a personal use tractor, to say nothing of the cost of big, huge farming tractors, like something that you would need to run a giant commercial farm.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's actually, so the price of new tractors has gotten so bad that even the price of used tractors is going up, and it's kind of hurting the farmers right now. but we're actually having a massive issue with labor right now as well. And because of that, a lot of farmers are trying to go more towards the automation side, but they can't afford to, or they don't see the return on investment being worth it. So they're kind of at stuck between a rock and a hard place right now. And so I think that as time goes on and technology advances and there's a lot more competitors in the field, because a lot of computer scientists and inventors and mechanical engineers are starting to see this as an opportunity and starting to work together with farmers. I think as that progresses, we're going to see cheaper, more affordable, more efficient, more effective equipment and technology produced. But right now we're kind of in the baby stage of what we call the fourth revolution of agriculture. There's been 4 of them, in case you didn't know.
No. What was the last one?
So I'll give you a brief history. So the first revolution of agriculture is fairly simple. We went from hunting and gathering to actually farming. That's about it. The second revolution was kind of the, I guess, like the first technological revolution. That's where we had, like horse-driven plows, and we had like the earliest forms of the tractor. And then like as time went on, we actually had like more advanced versions of tractors without computers in them, obviously, but more motorized tractors. And then it was a while, and we had the Green Revolution, which was, I want to say, back in the 40s, maybe it was a little bit later. That's where we started using more chemical pesticides and fertilizers, and a lot more application style stuff on our crops. And then now we're getting into the fourth revolution of agriculture, which is the automation revolution, basically. So now we're getting into more AI-based technology. We're getting into more of like precision ag as what it's called. So like you have machines that can monitor exactly how much water is in certain parts of the soil. You can monitor exactly how much sunlight certain crops are getting. You can monitor how much life is in certain areas of your field, so you know how much to spray for certain pesticides and that sort of thing. It's really, really precise and really amazing about how the technology works. But because we're in such an early phase of it, nobody knows what to do yet.
Interesting. So I'm thinking about, you said it's harder for farmers to invest in this equipment themselves. I have a friend of mine who basically, I don't know how he got started on this, but he started using drones for, I don't know if he just had a fascination with the drones or what, but he ended up making it into a business where he inspects pipelines with drones, and companies hire him to do pipeline inspections with drones. So he has an entire fleet of drones, and it's quite an operation. I'm very impressed with it. But I'm thinking about, would it make sense for a business to buy some of these automated automated robots, and use and basically lease their services to farmers, and so the farmers don't take on the risk themselves? Is that something that happens, or is that something that you think would make sense as viable for an outside business to do some of that?
Absolutely, and we actually are starting to see that a little bit as time goes on. Farmers are kind of reaching a state that they're not super, I don't want to say comfortable with, but they're very unfamiliar with, and that's that they're starting to become dependent on other parties to help them out with their operations. So because of regulation, now farmers are required to have a veterinarian as part of their inner circle. They have to have a good relationship with the veterinarian to be able to apply certain antibiotics to their animals. So there's And now we're starting to see if a farmer wants to use drones, they have to get a special pilot's license. They have to get special certification to use that kind of technology. And so a lot of farmers are either don't have the time, or they don't have the interest really to invest in that sort of endeavor. So they are actually reaching out to third parties, or actually your third parties are reaching out to them and saying, hey, well, let's work 2 ways here. So basically, somebody who knows how to pilot drones, or maybe who knows how to build drones, or maybe they'll work with a couple different companies, will come out and they'll fly the drone over their field. They'll tell them what they need to look for. The farmer will kind of work with them on what the information is that they're trying to get out of it, and that way both parties are benefiting from it. So you actually are seeing a lot more of that. Like I said, there's been a new wave of communication between farmers and other industries, especially in like the computer scientists and mechanical engineering industries, because of this new revolution of agriculture.
Okay, yeah, because that would make sense to me in that the farmer, and plus in some ways, because so much, especially with crops, less so with animals, but it's so seasonal that I could see it being difficult to justify, okay, why am I going to buy $100,000 apple picking robot whenever I only pick apples, 3 times a year. I don't know what the timing is, but I only do it 3 times a year. So why would I want to spend that much money whenever it doesn't take me that much longer to do this myself? Whereas I could pay a fee and have one guy do it in an hour with his fancy robot, and then you don't have to store it, you don't have to maintain it, etc.
Right, yeah, and labor costs are a big thing too. Like I said, we're having a bit of a labor shortage in the agriculture industry right now because, for one, kids don't have an interest in ag anymore. I mean, not nearly as much as they used to. A lot of kids who are going into the occupational field are not looking towards agricultural jobs. And a lot of kids who are just, and when I say kids, I mean, like high school graduates are not looking towards that sort of, like, not like, child labor kind of kids, but we're also not seeing a lot
kids
of
these days.
We used to see a lot of labor come from like immigration, or if people had like from lower income families, people would work on farms because it was cheap and easy labor, and they got pretty good benefits from it. I mean, like, in order to get someone to work on a farm, you have to pay them a pretty decent price because that's a lot of work to put in. So farm workers actually get paid a lot more than most minimum wage workers, and people don't realize that. They just think that farm working is like the worst thing ever, and so they don't really look into it a whole lot. So this labor shortage has kind of really impacted the technology industry and the agriculture industries to start becoming one thing pretty much.
Yeah, I did some hay hauling whenever I was in high school, and it didn't pay great, but it paid almost double my minimum wage job. So it was. Now I earned it. It was hard work. If you've never hauled hay before, hauling square bales, but it was But yeah, like I said, it's not bad pay, and they still the farmers still make a good profit. I think square bales at the time was running, I don't know, $4 a bale, something like that. And so we were touching a whole lot more than 4 bales a minute, so we were moving right along.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's the other thing, and we don't have to go into the entire history of the labor force, but that's just, I mean, that's a big thing. Like, kids used to grow up working on farms. That's where they got most of their experience about just life and how to earn what you live for, and that was like a big thing. It was I always grew up like working on my brother-in-law's dairies, or I'd work on family and friends' farms, and I would help out. Just that taught me a whole lot about responsibility and about hard work, and like you said, earning what you earn. But yeah, so I think that it's I think it'd be a good thing to encourage kids to kind of get into that more, but it's just not something we're seeing quite as much as we used to.
Yeah, and sorry, you can make an audio note here. I didn't realize my laptop wasn't plugged in, so I just plugged it in. There's a whole awful beating and banging, so feel free to edit that out. That is okay.
No worries. I'm
just looking at all these sharp waveforms. I'm like, oh man, that's going to be pretty to listen to.
Yeah, no, I'll scan through and try to see if I can catch it. But
if not, it's not a big deal.
Was there anything else on your list you wanted to go over?
I mean, honestly, we touched on a lot of it. Just in passing. One just small note for drones. What are farmers inspecting when they're using their drones? Are they looking to see when a crop is ready to harvest? Are they looking for breaks in fence? What are they looking for typically when they're flying drones or having somebody fly a drone?
That's an excellent question. So this is one of my favorite aspects of ag technology, and that's because like drones are something that they're such an interesting form of technology that it's like they're kind of new, but they're kind of not new anymore. And like we've always kind of known drones have been a thing, but their usage has always been somewhat ambiguous, because the only drones we know of that are actually used for anything in consumer life is pretty much just like video kind of stuff, and like they don't really do a whole lot more than just get cool shots of stuff. And I mean, at least I don't know. I know they have like drone racing and stuff like that, but like I don't know of much more usage that they have in in your average life. Like you don't go buy a drone to use it for something special. You just want it either to take pictures or just to play around with it, pretty much.
Yeah, I've seen Mark Rober do. He did something for Team Trees where he was planting. Nice. They used something to plant trees with the drones, which was pretty cool. I don't remember exactly how it worked, but it was pretty sweet.
And that's an application of drone usage that we don't really see a whole lot. And it always kind of surprises people when I tell them that drones, like the most technologically advanced drones that we have, are used by agriculture. I mean, maybe the military has better, but that's just because we don't know what they have. But agriculture has incredibly advanced drone technology, and they use it for all sorts of things. So a few years ago, there was a lot of controversy over whether or not farmers should be allowed to use drones because there was privacy issues of them flying over their neighbor's backyard and stuff, but that's beside the point. Over time, as that kind of got looked past and drones became more of an application use instead of just... So originally drones were used just to kind of watch over your farm. They're basically a moving security camera. They could fly around and make sure your cows were all on the pen they're supposed to be in. They could fly over your field and make sure that everything was looking okay. Basically, that way the farmer didn't have to do his daily drive-by in the morning to make sure everything was where it's supposed to be. And so that was kind of like the earliest stage of drone technology, and since then it's evolved so much and so quickly. Now they're used for all sorts of things. They can be used, I mean, just on the crop side of things, they can be used to apply pesticides on like a small scale area. And like, let's say there's a part of your farm that you want to spray that you don't want to spray the rest of your field, just take your drone over and you can spray that area. Or they could be used along with, like I said, that precision ag technology, where they could like scan a field and say, okay, there's heat signatures in this part of your field. You have a bunch of bugs over here. You need to go spray. Or there's a high concentration of moisture over here in this area, so your soil is doing really well. Or you can use them to like kind of cooperate with your irrigation system. So you can say, okay, that should be getting water right about now, and there's a low moisture content. Your irrigation system isn't working. And so like, there's a lot of new and kind of exciting technology used with drone use. And like you said, there's planting mechanics they can now use where they fly by and they actually plant seeds. Basically, drones are like almost in a sense like kind of a mini version of a tractor, more or less, which is kind of exciting because they can fly and they're fast and they're very precise, and the technology that they can be applied to them is almost identical, if not more technologically advanced than what can be applied to our current tractors with GPS and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of different applications for drones, and people don't really realize that much concentration of precision goes into farming.
How do farmers get past because you got battery limitations with a drone, so just a regular consumer drone, you get about 15 minutes out of a charge. I mean, I know you can get more battery packs and that kind of stuff, but whenever you have a drone carrying a payload like pesticide or something like that, or seeds, how do they, because I assume that has to suck battery a whole lot more than just a regular old consumer drone, so do they counteract that with bigger battery packs? What do they do?
So that's actually a really good point, because I did an interview with a drone producing company. They produce a special drone called the Bulldog UAV. The company's called Ultravance, in case you were wanting to look them up. They're awesome people. They have a great product. I'm not sponsored, by the way. But the thing that they were talking about was a big issue with drones for a really long time is exactly what you mentioned. The battery life was killing them. I mean, they even had higher tech drones that could fly by and basically monitor cows and make sure that the cows were where they're supposed to be. And they'd make like an hour into their routine and they would die. And so like, even an hour is pushing it for what most drones can usually do, and that was kind of incredible, but an hour is not nearly enough to inspect an entire area and make it back to the home in time. So there was a lot of kind of like, basically what they try to do with the Bulldog UAV is rework everything that they knew about drones to try to make that battery life last longer, and that was their primary focus. And they actually made it last like 2 or 3 hours, and then it comes back, switches batteries, and it can last another 2 or 3 hours. So they're basically, the drone industry is working really hard to develop a lot stronger batteries, a lot more technologically advanced drones that can carry lighter, or they can carry heavy weight without it putting too much on the battery. They have switchable batteries that are fast charged now. They have all kinds of different things that are helping out drones. I'm not sure if they have any solar powered drones. I'd be curious to see if that's a thing or not. But they're definitely, battery life has definitely been a primary focus and a primary issue with the drone industry so far. So they've been working really hard to fix it.
Are most of the drones used by farmers, are they automated or are they operated by a pilot?
So it kind of depends. They have, I would say most are probably operated by a pilot, and that's where they usually have a third party come in, somebody who has certification to fly it. They usually operate it and do all the stuff that needs to be done. They do have drones that are automated. They have a GPS system in them that tracks the path. Like, let's say it's a spraying drone. They have a GPS system in them that tracks the path of where the drone needs to spray, and it just goes and does it and then flies back. It's like a Roomba. It just goes back to his docking station. But I would say more often than not, you have somebody behind the wheel making sure that drone gets to where it needs to get to. Or if it's a monitoring drone, they have it so that they can actually watch the monitor and make sure it it's scanning the right thing and getting the right information down. But there are even some farmers who have kids who are like, in their early 20s, maybe early 30s, that are kind of looking into taking up the family farm, but are looking to expand the technological utility of that kind of stuff. And they're actually getting certified to fly drones for that intended purpose. That way they don't have to pay a third party to come in and do it. They can just do it themselves, and then once they take over the farm, they already know how to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I hope that answered your question okay?
Yes, no, it's good stuff. So I had one last question. It's probably a big one, but I'm thinking about how, we were kind of talking about the all-purpose robot versus the specific robot. I would think that one of the easiest and also most difficult machines to automate would be a tractor, in that a tractor is slow, and it should, there's a lot of room for sensors and that kind of stuff, a lot of room for putting giant batteries if you wanted to make it, battery powered, etc. But also, that's just the driving part. That would be relatively easy, but tractors are so all-purpose. You use them for bush hogging, you use them for plowing, you use them for so many different things. I would think having it smart enough to be automatic would be difficult. Am I overthinking that or underthinking that? What do you see as far as the viability of an automated tractor? Would that be something that could be, do you think?
So I'm trying to think of how to accurately answer that. Basically, so if I'm understanding your question right, basically, like, is it
feasible for an automated tractor to be? Because it does so many jobs. Could the bulk of their jobs be automated in one machine? Is it smart enough, or are we smart enough to make the tractor smart enough?
I think so. I think that it would take a lot of time for that kind of basically for it to be able to pull that kind of weight to be able to handle all those different jobs so easily. I know that there are tractors who are already automated, but they usually have, like I said, they have one intended purpose, or if they have different purposes, they have to do something different to the programming to make them do different purposes. It's not just the automation can automatically change to whatever you need to do instantly. There's certain types of programming that have to be involved, but I know for a fact there's almost completely, if not completely, autonomous driving tractors already. They have GPS in them that they can go by and they can spray a field, they can plant, they can do whatever they got to do. But if you have an all-purpose tractor, more often than not, it's going to be cheaper just to not automate them, because the amount of time and effort and energy and money that's going to go into switching over their programming for all those different tasks, it'd almost be cheaper just to get a whole new tractor for that task. So
that would make sense, yeah.
I would think, and I could be wrong about this, like I said, I'm no expert, but this is just from what I've seen from my research and from talking to farmers who use this kind of stuff. I would think that it may be possible in the future to have something that could just switch jobs that easily, but more often than not, if they're going to need automated tractors, they're going to need a certain tractor for a certain purpose, and they don't want to change that purpose more if they can avoid it.
To my technological brain, I would think a modular tractor would make the most sense, and the easiest way to do something like that would be you have a tractor that already has the main brain, and then when you hook up the bush hog, for example, it's smart enough to know, okay, I'm in bush hog mode now, and I'm going to go bush hog the field, and then you connect the front end loader, and that may be more generic, but maybe you connect the hay cutter. It's like, okay, I know where the hay field is at whenever you connect the hay cutter, so I'm going to go cut hay now. I would think that would be the best way to do it, rather than try and program one tractor for all the different tasks that it could do, and you may not ever need those tasks if you're buying a tractor for just a handful of purposes.
Right. No, exactly. And having that utility would be really nice if they, like you said, if you could just put the attachment on there and the tractor just knows, okay, I can go do this thing now. But like you said, it'd be almost impossible to know just what somebody who's buying that tractor would need it for, so they can't really program it beforehand to have all of those features in it and expect it to be super affordable. So there's definitely room to grow in that area. And like I said, this is all very new technology, so over the next few years we're going to see advancements that we can't even imagine, and I'm very excited to see what they come out with. But as the technology stands right now, I think that they're going to remain fairly one purpose or very few purposes, just because of the technological limitations we have right now.
And it's incredibly difficult. I mean, you see Tesla trying to make self-driving cars, and it is so difficult to make a car stay on the road and not run over the other cars. So
Yeah.
you think of the intricacies of picking crops and planting crops and all that stuff. There's a lot that goes into that. That has got to be an incredibly difficult problem.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And when you're handling something as delicate and as vital as food, there's really no room for error. So I think that it'd be in the farmer's best interest to try to just, actually in everyone involved's best interest to try to just to keep it as they can do their job as best as possible as they can possibly make it. That way they don't have to, like, if you confuse it too much and have too many different things going on, you run the risk of them doing something that could detrimentalize the crop, and that's not what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, exactly.
So was there anything else? I know you said that was kind of one of your big questions. Was there anything else on your list you wanted to cover?
I had one last very, very important question that absolutely must be answered with 100% seriousness.
Okay.
So you let it be known to me off of the mic that you are a Star Wars fan.
I am.
And so I am curious what Star Wars robot in the Star Wars canon would make the best farming robot.
Oh, man. I think that, so I'm a diehard R2-D2 fan, and I think that he would probably be the most helpful farming robot if I were to say, because C-3PO would be a good farm manager. But
he's pretty fussy though.
He is pretty fussy, and he would a cow would just flick its tail and knock him over, and he would just be upset for the rest of the day. So it's you really can't depend on him to get the job done. But R2-D2 is he's loyal to whoever needs him to do whatever he needs him to do. So like I said, it's like Anakin and Luke is running the farm. Let's say it's Luke on his moisture farm. They bought the robots to help out on the farm, presumably. If they had R2-D2 there and he said, hey, R2, can you go do this thing? He's going to get it done because he's loyal to his owner. So I think that, there's a lot of robots out in the universe of Star Wars that would be fun to see. I can't remember what his name is. The robot from Rogue One would be very interesting, but he's also super
Oh, the snarky one?
Yeah,
he would be fun.
He'd be very interesting to see work on a farm, but he'd also probably wouldn't get any work done just because he'd be so mad at everyone all the time.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking R2-D2 would be a good, he'd pilot a tractor, because he's used to piloting X-Wings, and then
right.
I think C-3PO, you were onto something with the management thing though, because especially if you have a lot of different people working on your farm, maybe who all speak different languages and things like that, he could interface with them because he's a communications droid, so he could easily talk to the various people in their own language and be able to really broaden your workforce that way.
That actually is a really good point, because that is a big problem for a lot of farmers in their workforce, is the language barrier. They usually have to hire a manager who's bilingual. That way they can communicate between the workers and the owner. So having a protocol droid like that would be able to translate would be actually extremely helpful. But I don't want to see C-3PO on a farm. That's not going to go well. But R2-D2, on the other hand, I like the idea of a tractor that just has an astromech port for him to just sit in, and he's just driving the tractor around the field.
See, that would be way cheaper than having to automate the entire tractor. You just have the one little robot who pilots it. So
yeah,
there you go.
awesome.
We just solved ag. There we go.
There you go. You just have to build R2-D2 and you got it.
Exactly. All right. Good deal.
That was a very good question. I was very happy about that.
Good.
I actually did have a question for you on a similar.
Oh.
I actually meant to mention this earlier, but I completely forgot. And I looked down at my notes and I was like, oh, I forgot to talk about this. So upon listening to the first episode of your podcast, which for our viewers who did not know, I think I mentioned in the last episode, but Patrick here runs a podcast called SillyMundaneThings, and it's excellent. It's only 3 episodes, which is not enough, but it's a very nice, just kind of relaxation. Turn your brain off and just listen to a kind of podcast. Very entertaining, very goofy. And in the first episode, you guys talked about Stardew Valley.
Yes. Big Stardew Valley fans. We actually did a whole episode where we talked about Stardew quite a lot, but that's not released yet. It will come soon.
See, I am a big fan of Stardew Valley as well. My sister and I grew up playing Harvest Moon.
Oh, nice. Yeah, me too. Me and my sister did too.
And I got into Stardew Valley as soon as I got my Switch. It was one of the first games I bought on the store. So, when listening to that episode, it clicked in my mind. So this guy's played a somewhat of a farming simulator style game, and he hasn't made any Stardew Valley references yet. that
I know, right? I should have brought my Star Drop.
So I was gonna make an analogy at the beginning of this episode when you were talking about the technological advancement of agriculture. I was gonna say, so you know how in Stardew Valley when you start off you have your little sprinkler. It's like very basic. You can only hit like 4 tiles.
Yes.
And
yes, the first thing I do is upgrade those sprinklers.
Exactly. As you progress through the game, you have to upgrade and get better sprinklers because you obviously need to water your crops, but it takes so long to go out there every morning and water them individually yourself that basically the entire day's gone by the time you water your field. So imagine that, and you also have no workforce. Like, people can't work for you in that game. You can't, like, you can have a kid, but he never grows up to work with you, which I still think is stupid. But there's no, I mean, your wife can help you occasionally, but that's about it. Like, there's very little you can actually do to increase the productivity of your farm besides increasing the ability of your sprinkler reach, basically. So
you can get the pickers for the chickens and the cows, which helps a lot. Trying to get the milk and eggs picked up, but there's still a lot of daily minutia that you have to manage.
That's true. I mean, there's just a lot that goes into it, but upgrading your technology, it definitely helps increase that process's efficiency.
Oh, for sure.
So I would use that analogy to describe agriculture. So as an industry, we have a tedious task of every day having to do the same things over and over and over again to make sure that our food is as safe and as healthy and as bountiful as possible. If we have the ability, we want to upgrade our technology as much as we can. That way we can make those daily tasks shorter and easier. That way we have more time to do other stuff to make our food even better. So that's kind of my analogy I like to throw in there. As someone who understands what I'm saying when I say that, there's a certain level of kind of like corner cutting that comes into it. Like, whenever you're able to do that, there's so much more you can do with your day now because you saved 5 minutes watering plants.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. I mean, especially with farming, there's always something more that you can do. And in Stardew, there's always something else that you need to be doing. You need to go catch the fish, you need to go to the mine, you need to do whatever. You never have enough energy or daytime.
Exactly.
Especially if you're playing multiplayer, because multiplayer, there's no pausing. So you have to be very efficient. There's many a time Becky and I would be playing a day and we're just like, oh no, this just totally messed up. You want to start over? It's like, yep, let's start over. This I did not get done what I needed to get done.
And I definitely relate to that a lot. Whenever I play Stardew Valley, there's so many times I'm just like, do I really want to just keep going with this day? I already wasted like 5 minutes doing something I should not have been doing. I'm just going to restart. So unfortunately, farmers don't get that option. They have to finish each day as it goes. But
yeah,
that game, for as goofy and cartoony and silly as it is, like, my sister made fun of me for weeks because I was trying to woo a girl with salad every day, which is very fun.
Wait, who's the girl? Who's the girl?
Leah.
Oh man, so our episode we did, the Stardew episode that's not been released yet. Our guest we had on there, Leah was the one he would woo. So
yeah,
it was very funny.
Leah's great, but so that entire game, as for as goofy and quirky as it is like one of the most accurate games I've ever seen in terms of relating to agriculture, because it's time goes by so much faster than you think it does, and you have so much to do and no time to do it. So you have to find like the most efficient ways to get things done. That way you have more time to do other stuff that you need to do. And that's like, I can't think of a better analogy for farming than that.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's awesome. I love Stardew, and yes, it relates to. I can't relate to farming as much, but just your day in general. It's like if you're managing anything, it's like, oh, there's always something else you can be doing, and so yeah, I appreciate the time management part of Stardew.
Absolutely, and that is a big. I think that's kind of the purpose of the game, is to try to teach you time management skills, which is ironic because you're playing a video game, learning about time management. But I wanted to kind of throw that reference in there because I thought that might make you appreciate the process a little bit more of technological advancement in ag.
Very much. My co-host would enjoy it even more. She's deeper in the Stardew than I am. I haven't got to have kids yet. Yeah, I haven't either. I want to fire it back up.
After we get done with this episode, I might actually fire up my file and go feed my chickens.
That'll be good.
Actually, that reminds me of another robot that I forgot to mention. We actually have robot milkers and robot iodine dippers.
Really? Mm-hmm. So I knew milking was relatively automated, but you still had to attach the milker to the cow. But so there's robots that will do that automatically. You put the cow in the chute and it'll automatically do the job?
Pretty much. So it's not quite as common of a practice as it sounds. There's there's actually very few dairies that use automated milking, but it is rapidly becoming a newer and more kind of feasible way of milking, rather than having a whole work staff that's there having to milk, at 4 a.m. and then again at 7 o'clock at night or whatever. They actually have so a lot of dairies are kind of going into a system of having trackers on their cows that can actually monitor like the heart rate of the cow, how many steps they take, I think I might mention that last episode. I can't remember for sure.
I remember that. That sounds fascinating. If you did, I apologize for not remembering. But that sounds very cool.
I talk about this stuff way too much. I forget who I tell what. But yeah, they have trackers on their cows that say like, how many steps they've taken, how much water they've drinking today, how much how much food they've consumed, and it's all related to like the thermo energy in their body. You can track all that kind of stuff and say what's going on in their body. And so it can like tell like when they're in heat, when they're ready to be bred again, if they're pregnant, how far along they are, how their baby's doing, like all that stuff. It's really, really exciting and interesting. And a lot of farmers or a lot of dairymen rather are kind of going into the idea of having those cows like on basically like weighted pressure plates while they're being milked, and that weighted pressure plate weighs them. The tracker, it like scans into a computer and it puts all the information into a database, and that way they have information on the cow and they know, okay, this ear tag is this weight and she's eaten this much, she's taken this many steps, and they can actually see if there's massive differences in behavior. They can say, okay, that cow is sick, we need to go see what's wrong with her. And so all of that has kind of tied into the idea of having more automated systems of taking care of the cows. And you're never going to be able to completely replace human work on the farm, because humans are what make the farm run, and there needs to be a certain level of humanity in there, or else it's not going to work properly. But there are a lot of jobs that are being filled by automation, and milking is actually one of them that's kind of up and coming. So they actually have a machine it's just like a metallic arm, and when I say arm, I don't mean like a physical human looking arm with a hand on it. It's just a metallic bar that extends
like
out.
Like a Mike Boom arm type thing.
Yeah, exactly. So it extends out, and it has the milk, what do you call it? The milk machine, the what you actually put on the udder to get all the milk out of it. And it actually moves to where the cow is supposed to be, because cows are roughly the same length of body if they're all the same breed. So Holsteins and Jerseys are all roughly the same length of body. And so I actually don't know what the length is, so I couldn't tell you, but they have the milk machine kind of programmed to be about where the udder should be lengthwise on the cow, and then it just slowly moves up. They try not to move it too quickly, that way it doesn't spook the cow, it doesn't hurt it, doesn't do anything like that. It just slowly moves up until the udder is aligned with it, and then it pretty much attaches itself. And then once the cow is milked, they have the arm come back up, retrieve the milking machine, and they put it back away, and then all the milk gets sorted and does whatever it's going to do. But and actually during that process, they have like health monitors that are tracking the cow while it's being milked too, so they can see what the health of the milk looks like, if the cow's producing enough, if she's all this kind of stuff, the metabolism of the cow. It's kind of incredible the kind of technology they're using to monitor cows.
That sounds absolutely fascinating. Like that is super, super cool, and it sounds incredibly difficult, because when you're dealing with something, because cows are relatively not docile, but they're relatively chill if you don't spook them. Mm-hmm. But even still, that is an incredible feat of engineering to be able to make a robot that can anticipate some of that and then do it without, spooking the cow and getting the very expensive robot destroyed by a scared cow.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's a really big deal about a lot of animal agriculture technology is making sure that the animal is as comfortable as possible, and that's part of the reason why automation is being implemented as well, is because animals produce their best product when they are comfortable and when they're calm. If you stress out an animal, its meat is going to taste really bad, or its milk is going to taste really bad, or its eggs are going to taste really bad. Stress lowers the quality of the product, and so by that standard, it makes no sense to stress out cows, for example, more than you need to. So having an environment where they have like a soft bed to lay on, they have good food to eat, they have proper exercise and water available, they have a healthy environment to have their calf, and then their calf is taken care of, and then they are milked that way. Because if a cow walks around with milk too long in its body, it starts to develop a kind of toxicity to it, and it can actually harm and sometimes kill the cow if they're not milked for a long period of time. And so it's very almost vitally important to both the cow and the farmer that cow gets milked. And so everything that goes into the milk extraction process is for the comfort and the well-being of that cow. And that's kind of where automation goes as far as the animal agriculture industry goes, is making sure that animal is as comfortable and healthy as it possibly can be.
That's super interesting, and I guess that's also why free-range animals are a thing.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. And for those operations that aren't free range, they're trying to find ways to adapt that can be more comforting for that animal, because free range isn't always an option just because of land restrictions. There's obviously animal agriculture operations that don't have pasture land available, or there's just not pasture land available to have an operation on. So they have to kind of go into more of what's called a CAFO or a CAFO, a confined animal feeding operation. That's where animals are kind of kept in pens or in corrals or barns or that sort of thing, and they're just fed out where they are. But in order to accommodate for that, they have regulations and they have restrictions, and they have even like personal choices on how to make that animal as comfortable and as happy as possible, because happy cows make good milk.
And everybody wants happy cows so they can have happy good milk, so that makes sense to me.
That's right. And also on that same note, just to mention it because it just came to mind, we also have what's called the robot dipper, and not dipper like in Gravity Falls, but dipper as in another mechanical arm that comes out and it has a little kind of like a little spray gun on it, I guess you could say. And whenever the cow is underneath it, it actually shoots iodine onto the cow's udder, which disinfects it. And it prevents it from bacteria spreading it and getting that cow infected and sick. So that's also a thing that's actually a lot more common than the robotic milker.
That's pretty crazy. I've never done milking myself, although I've known people who had, so I didn't even know about the iodine, but that totally makes sense for disinfectant. I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah, that's actually a vital process in milking, is whenever you are done milking a cow, you have to make sure you dip it in iodine, or else that cow runs the risk of being infected and getting sick. And obviously, like I said earlier, an unhealthy cow or a sick cow or an uncomfortable cow is not going to produce a good product. So we really need to focus on keeping that cow healthy and happy. So iodine is a big friend of cows.
Is that from the milker itself, or is it just because the fact that they have been milked can cause infection? In terms of just like being exposed to the milk machine would cause an infection, or would correct?
Okay, so
yeah.
The iodine is more or less it's kind of like an all-purpose protective agent to use. So yeah, because you're putting the same milk machine on different cows, I mean, it gets cleaned, but because you're putting the same milk machine on different cows all the time, you run the risk of kind of just spreading bacteria that could cause that cow infection. But overall, I mean, those cows are laying out in dirt or in almond holes, or they're just out in they're out in the middle of the open all the time. So there's just always a risk of bacteria being present, and so they try to keep the pens as clean as possible, but they can't always catch everything. So it's just kind of better to be safe than sorry, because after a cow's getting milked, they are more vulnerable to infection and more vulnerable to getting that bacteria up inside their udder. So it's really important to try to keep that protected until the next milking.
Okay, that makes sense.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's all I can think of as far as robots go. I went over crops that can't be picked mechanically. That was on my list. I think that's everything. So do you have any other questions for me as far as ag technology, or pretty much anything else in ag goes? I know we didn't talk about biotechnology much, but that's on the agenda as well if you were curious about it.
I don't even know how to ask that in an educated manner, but I'd be interested to learn. Yeah.
Well, biotechnology, I'm assuming you know what GMO is. I think we talked about this last episode.
You defined it, but I don't know exactly. I don't know exactly how it works.
So biotechnology and GMOs are very similar, but they're not exactly the same thing. So I'll explain. So a GMO, or a genetically modified organism, is by definition just anything that has gene modified. So technically something that's been crossbred or something that's been naturally adapted to its environment is a GMO, but everyone disagrees with everyone else on that. That's kind of a big debate. So the dictionary definition, or what somebody naturally would consider a GMO, is something that has had its genetic code artificially altered. So basically, I'll give you an example. There's a GMO out there called golden rice, and golden rice is just regular white rice, but it has a higher amount of beta carotene in it. So they literally take a gene from another crop, I think it's carrots, and they put it into this rice, and it makes it kind of a golden brown color, and that makes it higher in vitamin A, or at least the non-active version of vitamin A. So that way, and they actually fed it to kids in developing countries that had like anemia and they're having eyesight issues, and they made that a staple in their diet. That way, they had the vitamin A that was not present in their diet quite as much. So that's the bare basics of what a GMO is. Basically, they just have a gene that's not that's kind of foreign to their species and introduced to their genome, and that changes their function as a food.
Okay, so tell me this: why are GMOs such a hot topic, no in a lot of circles? Like you see so many foods advertised as non-GMO and this and that. And when basically any food is a variation of a GMO. I mean, if I'm remembering correctly, and don't quote me on this as not a farmer, but my understanding is that carrots were not naturally orange; they were purple, I think, and then they got bred to be orange for some reason or another, and then that's what a carrot is. Carrots are orange, but that's not their natural, or that wasn't the original carrot was not orange. And you may feel free to correct me, but
so
yes.
I'm not super familiar with the actual carrot backstory. I do know corn has a very interesting backstory, and I'll see if I can remember to send you a picture of what the earliest version of corn looked like. But basically, yeah. Crossbreeding has been involved in agriculture for as long as agriculture has existed as an industry. It's something that we as a society have deemed to be a natural and healthy process to producing better results for things. I mean, I can't imagine that most people have dogs that are purebred. Most of them are crossbred of some kind. And if they're purebred, even then they're not exactly how they were when that dog species emerged evolutionarily. I mean, everything came from something else at one point, and it was crossbred down to what we have today. Most people aren't even purebreds. So having that understanding is vital for interpreting the GMO issue. But basically, it's a hot topic because there's a bunch of reasons it's a hot topic, but I'll just go over a few of them. It's a hot topic because people are somewhat misinformed about what a GMO actually means. And there's kind of a scare, I guess you could say, about what a GMO actually is and what consequences are aligned with GMOs. So GMOs have been around for, I guess, roughly a little over 20 years. So the first GMO that was ever introduced to the markets was the Flavor Saver tomato. That was back in 1996, I want to say. It might have been 94, but I think it was 96. My dates are always kind of fuzzy, but that tomato was genetically modified by having a gene of another, I think it was another fruit. I can't remember what the gene came from now, but basically it made that tomato last longer on the shelf. It wouldn't rot as quickly. And ever since then, we've had GMOs all over our markets. There's not as many as people think. There's only about 9 crops that are actually GMOs. Like GMO by the definition of they've actually had their genes altered artificially, but there's a lot more GMOs than people imagine. So if you see non-GMO corn, I challenge you to find me non-GMO corn. About 98% of all corn is genetically modified. It's very hard to find non-GMO corn. But the reason for that is because there's certain benefits. There's actually a lot of benefits to genetically modifying that is kind of the inspiration for why we have food at the abundancy that we have it now. So basically, GMOs do a lot of different things. They can produce shelf life. They can produce a longer shelf life. They can produce a greater yield. They have higher health benefits. Some of them have nutritional changes, like I said with the golden rice. They have all kinds of different benefits, and a lot of them are as simple as we just don't have the land to produce as much food as we need to produce for our population, so we need to adapt to it. And GMOs are the adaptation. People just don't like that. And so there's been a lot of misconceptions around GMOs. You see the non-GMO label. So before I go into the whole label thing, let me ask you, if you were to see two individuals that go to the gym every day, and one of them says, basically they're both just shredded, huge looking dudes, and they're standing next to each other, and one of them looks at the other guy and says, well, at least I don't use steroids. What does that make you think about the other guy?
Well, you don't know that the other guy doesn't use steroids. It just made an accusation.
Right. So the kind of common, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the common assumption of people is that because if somebody says that something is non-GMO and something else doesn't have a non-GMO label, the first thing that comes to mind is like, oh, this must be a GMO because it doesn't have the label that says it's not. But people don't often realize that the non-GMO label is completely optional. Most foods are non-GMOs, and they are not like grapes, for example. There's a brand of grapes, I can't remember what the brand is now, and I don't want to call them out anyways, but they have a non-GMO label on their packaging. There's no such thing as a GMO grape. There never has been. So it's kind of like false advertising to say that it's a non-GMO grape because yeah, they're all non-GMO grapes. Like that's kind of the point. But there, because of this labeling issue, and same thing goes with antibiotic free and hormone free and all that kind of stuff. There's this idea that if it's non-GMO, it must be better for you. It must be healthier. It must be safer. There must be something wrong with GMOs if people are making an effort to say that there's not GMOs in their product, and that's just not true. It's just a marketing ploy that basically tricked a bunch of people into thinking that there's something better about non-GMO foods than there actually is. So
non-GMO farmers are better at marketing than your average farmers. Is that what you're saying?
So that's actually the
trick. Tongue a little bit in cheek there. please take no offense.
No, I definitely caught the sarcasm there. But there's actually a lot of issues. People think that farmers are doing the marketing, and that's actually not true. Farmers have no control on the marketing whatsoever. Unless the farmers are the distributors themselves, which is very, very rare, most farmers sell their product off to a processor who sells it to a distributor who then markets it to the retailer. The distributor, actually not even the distributor, usually it's the retailer or somebody who's involved in the packaging process is the one that puts the label on there. The farmer can get certified to have the label on there, but it's very rare that the farmer has the choice of saying, yeah, put that on there or not. The distributor usually says, we're going to make this a non-GMO label. And so that's kind of the misconception is people think that farmers are labeling these things to make money. The farmer doesn't get anything from the label. Actually, the farmer gets hurt from the label because if they say they don't label their food non-GMO, people assume that they grow GMOs and they ask them why they're trying to kill everybody. And that's just not accurate. For most farmers are non-GMO farmers. They just don't grow them and they don't label their stuff as non-GMO, but that doesn't mean that they grow GMOs. And so that's the issue we're facing right now is people have this misconception of what GMO means, of what's healthier and what's not. And really it's based out of a few things. Labeling is just one of the issues. Another one is that because GMOs are so new, people think that there's going to be long-term health effects that are unforeseen, and there hasn't been a single study published to date that has said anything close to that being accurate. So, I mean, there's been claims that there are certain GMOs that are causing cancer and autism and that sort of thing. None of that's ever been proven. There hasn't been any study that's shown that there's been any correlation between eating GMOs and the rates of cancer and autism increasing. So there's been a lot of misconceptions thrown around, and media is partially to blame because there's a lack of communication. People think they know something, and then without actually fact-checking it, they just say it, and automatically people think it's gospel. So that's kind of the issue with GMOs, I guess you could say, is that people just don't know what they are, really.
So I would be curious how the correlations come into effect, because it's breeding. I mean, that's not breeding. It is you're cross pollinating different kinds of plants to get a new breed or a new version of corn, for example. But I feel like that a lot of people might have my thought processes. I'm having a hard time gathering my thoughts, but I'm thinking that a lot of people just correlate. You said, like, mentioned the hormones and antibiotics and the GMOs. They just put it all together. These are all things just to get more yield versus at the expense of quality food. Mm-hmm. And again, I don't really. I'm losing my train of thought. I can't.
I know where you're going with it. I think. Okay. I think I have an idea where you're going with it. Basically,
help,
yeah.
Please.
if I'm reading your context correctly, basically what you're kind of saying is that people are just seeing all these labels and collectively assuming anything that's not labeled this is automatically bad. The antibiotics, pesticides, GMOs. If you use any of those things, it's just a farmer's way of making a quick buck at the expense of the safety and quality of the food that's being fed to the consumers. Is that in the ballpark of what you're trying to get at?
Yeah, because I think people are under the assumption that food isn't as good as it used to be because it's just filler, it's just empty, because so we can pump up this corn, make it as big as possible, so that way we can get as much yield as humanly possible. And I feel like that is a lot of the feeling amongst those groups.
Yeah, I would say that's fairly accurate. I think that a lot of it is that I mean, everything is kind of connected to the idea that a lot of consumers just have a somewhat misunderstood idea of what agriculture really is. I mean, like we talked about today, a lot of people don't know about all the technology that goes into ag, about all the like the hard work and processing that goes into producing that product, about all the labeling, about all everything. So there's often somewhere lost in the translation is often the idea that farmers are doing whatever they're doing for profit. That's very rarely the case. I mean, a lot of farmers make a pretty decent amount of money, sure, but a lot of that money goes back into their farm. It's all tied in capital. Or a lot of farmers are struggling just to keep their heads above water, period. I mean, right now with everything going on in the world, farmers are having to dump milk and euthanize animals because they can't afford to keep them alive. There's a lot of issues going on in the ag industry because the economy is just falling apart. And to say that farmers are producing products that could potentially be harmful to consumers just to make a quick buck is just, that just doesn't make sense to me, because farmers are eating the same food that they're producing. And like a lot of that food has to be federally inspected from a safety perspective. It has to follow regulation. It has to follow all these protocols, and farmers have to jump through 1,000,001 hoops to have certifications, to have not warrants, but I can't think of the word right now, but basically they have to have permission to grow that food a certain way. So farmers wouldn't go through all those hoops and deal with all those regulations and deal with all of that stuff just to produce a crop that's not good for anybody. Because farmers, I mean, anyone who says that farming is a profitable business is just not very well educated, in my opinion. And that's not to say people who think that farmers make a lot of money are stupid. It's to say that farming is basically the same thing as gambling. You're investing a lot in Mother Nature and hoping that she provides for you, because a lot of times that doesn't work out, and farmers lose a lot of money, and they very often
maybe
have
more
to
like
shut
the
down
stock
their
market
farms.
than gambling.
That's fair. That's more accurate analogy. But it's just, if farmers wanted to make money, they would not be farming. I'll leave it at that. So and not to get all soapboxy again like I did last episode, but it's just a matter of if I could talk to, I mean, I am talking to the consumer right now, but if I could talk to the massive majority of consumers and have them take something away, the one thing I would just have them take away is just make sure you do your research before you assume that something means something. I mean,
I definitely represent all consumers, by the way, just so we're clear.
And that's definitely what I was going for. I mean, your opinions and your views are reflective of every consumer in the entire world. That's what we're sticking by.
I mean, that makes sense to me. I mean, if the world would definitely be an interesting place if that was the case.
But
we'd all be playing Stardew.
Right. The world would be such a nicer place if everyone just played Stardew.
That's a true story, man. That is a chill game. It's kind of hard. It's hard to be wound up whenever you're playing Stardew, except for maybe whenever you're in the mines. But
yeah, the mines are very frustrating, but it's so relaxing because you can just go give salad to the girl you're trying to woo, and it's
exactly
great. But
those desert mines are a little more interesting. But yeah, anyway, sidetracked.
No. But no, I think that if people were more willing to have these conversations like you are, and if people were more willing to look into what the labels mean and do more research on what's going on in the ag industry, they'd be very surprised to find that farmers are going through more trouble than most industries right now, that they're struggling to break even most days. They're putting all their blood, sweat, and tears into a product that's probably not going to make it to market because of the economy right now. It's kind of a rough life for farmers right now. And I understand where the fear comes from for GMOs and for antibiotics and for pesticides, because they're all scary things. They're things that, we just get told what these things are by media. We're not taught in school what a GMO is, at least not unless you're in an ag class. But it's something that, like, I didn't even know what GMO was until I started doing public speaking, and I learned from a speech I was writing. And I grew up in agriculture, so it's like there's a lot of stuff that is just very overlooked. when it comes to food, and I think that it's just if people took another 5 minutes to do a quick Google search, it would fix a lot of issues. But that's my 2 cents on that.
If I can add to that,
Of course.
less about farming, more about media in general. I'm going to say on media, be careful what you listen to when it comes to media. In that I'm not getting on a political rant by any means, but when it comes to any kind of media makes generalizations and assumptions when it comes to especially specialized products and specialized services. I may have told you before. I've done lending. That's basically been my background for 10 years, and so I had seen reports on LinkedIn and things like that from reputable sources talking about my company, and specifically a few years back, and they're saying this company does this and this, and they do these payday loans and they do this and this, and I'm like, no, that is factually untrue. You can get on my website and you can see it specifically says does not do payday loans and this kind of stuff, but no, they're making all these claims that are just like either a gross misrepresentation of the truth or just a flat out like, no, that is not what we do. That's not the customer that we service. That's not our business. And, this is laid out as fact. And then, I'm reading this and I know that is not true. And then, but the general consumer is going to read that and say, oh, well, this company, that's just, we don't want to do anything with that. And then me as an employee is going to sit there and say, no, that's not how it is. And it just makes you look like, sure, of course you'd say that. You work there. Like, yes, I work there. I know. But they're like, well, you work there. You're not going to say anything bad about it. So all that to say, I agree. Do your research before you make an assumption based on simply what one news anchor says or what one article says from a media outlet, because in a lot of cases they do just the barest amount of research and they say, oh, well, this is how all things are everywhere, and it's not going to be the case in all cases. Do your own research before you make a decision or assumption based on one potentially misinformed article that you read. And that is all. Soapbox, close off, etc.
No, absolutely. And I won't go into that too much because I've already soapboxed quite a bit today, but I think that that's probably the best advice I could second. I think that that's a really good, and that's, you perfectly described one of the biggest issues we're having right now with the ag industry and media, is that we're not allowed to defend ourselves because we are the agriculturalists. It's like, well, of course you're going to say that. You grow the food. It's like, well, who else is going to defend us then? Because nobody else cares, obviously. And so it's just a matter of like, yeah.
Let me give you a call to action, dear listener. If you don't believe me on that, I would challenge you, whatever your area of expertise is, whatever your industry is, go look for an article on your company specifically or your industry specifically, and just see what they say. See if everything that they say is 100% true or exaggerated or etc. I can guarantee you'll be able to find some things that just either is, again, exaggerated, untrue, or whatever, and that's true of any industry, I would imagine, unless it's just super public facing. Okay. Now rant truly over.
So real quick on that same subject, and I know I've been saying a million times we're going to get off this, but I really need to address this because your story reminded me of this. If you go into the Discord chat, I sent you a picture, and I want you to look. I sent you 2 pictures, actually, but I want you to look at the second one.
The one with the cow?
Yes. If you, just being perfectly honest, if you had to describe what is happening in that picture, what contraption that cow is in, what do you think that is?
Okay, so the picture's really small, but it looks like, I'll describe what I'm seeing here. It is really small. Let's see if I can enhance. No, it's fine. It's fine. All right. So for the listeners, this looks, it's a flatbed truck with a cow on the back. It has its head and neck caught between what looks like 2 big metal sheets. So it's keeping its head in one place. And the farmer has a long pair of what looks like nail clippers, which for a cow, that's about the size of a hedge clipper. And it looks like he is either clipping the cow's nails or he is cleaning his feet, but it's hard to tell. But it's I won't say it's awful, but it doesn't look great.
So that process is hoof trimming. So
I actually I just saw the name of the picture. Like, oh, it is okay. I wasn't too far off. It is clipping the
no,
toes.
You're definitely right on par. So he might be a farmer, but I don't know. Usually, a farmer will call in a hoof trimmer to do this, so he might not even own cattle. He probably just does this for a living. But he has special equipment to trim down the cow's hooves. That way, when they're walking, they don't have structure issues. They don't throw out their back. They don't hurt or whatever. Because walking over time, their hooves kind of get long, just like our fingernails and toenails do, and it can make the cow uncomfortable. So that's a very important process to making sure the cow stays structurally sound and healthy and happy and all that sort of stuff. The reason I show you this picture, and what you said towards the end there is very important about how you said it doesn't look great. I agree. It's a very dirty truck. The cow doesn't look like it's having a great time. But if I were to tell you that machine is used to slaughter cows, would you believe me?
If you didn't have the man with the long stick, trimming the cow's hooves, I would say, yeah, maybe. I actually have no idea how the slaughtering process works. I have no idea how that works.
Okay, well, we can cover that in another episode if you would like.
Yeah, it's like I'm not sure you want to get into that here.
I mean, I'm all for it. This podcast is tried and true, having honest conversations about agriculture. I don't hold anything back, because I think that the more you hold back, the more confusion and concern there's going to be. So if you just lay it out on the table as intellectually honestly as you can, that's all you can do. And if people can take from it, that's what I'm looking for, what they will, then that's all you can do, basically. But anyways, we'll get into that later. This picture, not this exact picture, but a picture of this contraption without the man there, it was just with the cow in this kind of contraption. It was a different chute with a different cow in it, was posted all around Facebook. It might not have had a cow in it. It might have just been the chute. I can't remember now. But it's posted all around Facebook, and it was described as a machine that shakes cattle to death, that squeezes cattle to death, that is used to trap cattle before they're killed. All these things. If you had to guess, how fast do you think? So that chute, if you're looking at the picture, it's tipped on its side right now. Usually it's up forward, or it's up vertically. I couldn't think of the word for a second. Mm-hmm. It's up vertically usually, and then they have a motor that tips it on its side like that. If you had to guess how fast it tips on its side, what would you say?
Well, I mean, going off of what we said before, cows want to be happy, so I would say very, very slowly.
You'd be right. It's incredibly slow. I mean, like 1 mile an hour might be pushing it. It's pretty slow. So in order to even shake that cow to death would be nearly impossible, just because the motor itself doesn't do that. There's no squeezing mechanism on that chute to cause that cow to have that kind of restriction. So how
does it keep the cow stable? Because I'm only seeing that one bit around his shoulder haunches. So is all the pressure on the shoulder? Or is there more support towards the back? I can't tell from that picture.
So it's kind of hard to see in the picture. So that it's called a head stall or a stanchion that holds the cow's head in place that way. Because if the cow can't move its head, it usually can't flail its body a whole lot. But it's all four of its legs are tied down to the table. That way they can't move and kick the hoof trimmer in the head. Perfectly safe. They use ropes, or they use chains that have padding on them. That way it doesn't hurt the cow. And they have like little hooks on the chute itself that they just clip to, and it just keeps the cow restrained for long enough for them to get their hooves trimmed, and they're good to go.
That makes sense. I mean, it's kind of like shoeing a horse or whatever. It's it's not necessarily awful, but you don't want them kicking around while you're trying to work on their feet.
Exactly. So yeah, it's not the best looking thing in the world, but it's a lot safer for both parties involved. That way the cow doesn't get hurt from kicking something, and the man doesn't get hurt from getting a foot to the head. But that whole picture was described as something terrible, and something that it definitely was not. And any farmer who tried to defend it, saying that's a hoof trimming chute, the cows need that. If the cow doesn't get its hoofs trimmed, then it could definitely mess up the cow, and it'll be hurt and everything. And they got completely ignored because they're the farmer. Of course they're going to defend it. And so that reminded me of the post you were talking about, that you were trying to defend that you couldn't because you're in the industry, so people aren't going to listen to you. And so that's where I was going with that. Not that we need to go into a whole animal rights discussion, because that could be a whole episode in and of itself, but that's kind of where I was going with the whole media thing. I'm
so sorry. I heard racket on my end. I thought I heard a child but I think we're okay.
No worries.
So I missed the last bit of what you said there. I was like, what am I hearing? And so I totally zoned out for until you said the animal rights stuff. So I apologize.
No worries. I was just saying that's kind of where I was going with the whole media discussion thing, but that's a whole other conversation we can have another day. So you actually might be on for a third episode. Just depends if you still want to listen to my ranting.
I've had a good time. This has been fun.
Yeah, I think that having more conversations like this of more just like, well, what does this do, and how does this work, and how do farmers get past this is a very good thing to have on both ends. It kind of lets us in the agriculture industry know where consumers' heads are at. What do they actually care about? What are they actually curious about? What don't they know about? What are we failing to teach them? And it teaches you guys what we're actually up to. We're not doing anything sketchy. We're not trying to hurt anybody. We're just trying to produce food.
I like food. Food is good.
Agreed. So that's all I had. I don't know if you have any other comments or anything you want to say on that subject.
No, I don't think so. I think we covered a more focused but still decently wide breadth of topics. I was not anticipating talking about Stardew, so that's always fun.
I told you I had some content from your episode I wanted to bleed into this one. So
yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, so that's all I have. And so I forgot to do this last time, but I'm going to let you do it this time. So do you have anything you want to plug? Anything anywhere can reach you? You want to plug your own podcast by chance?
Yeah. So I appreciate that. Did we not do this last time? I don't recall.
We didn't. I meant to, and I completely forgot until after we were already done recording.
Okay, well, perfect. Since this is a two-parter anyway, I guess this works out. So, like you said earlier, I co-host a podcast with my friend Becky. We do the Silly Mundane Things podcast. It is a two-persons talking podcast, similar sort of to Hello Internet, where, that's that genre, I guess, of podcast. But we've done 3 episodes, like you'd mentioned. We just talk about a little bit of everything. Our first episode we talked about Christmas lights and Christmas music. The second one we talked about Rise of Skywalker, and did a review of that amongst a few other meandering discussions, including
Twilight was involved.
Yeah, including Twilight, the Queen of Canada, and a few other things. So, yeah, there's a little bit of this and that. Our most focused episode was the last one, and that was the we did escape a collaboration with Escape This Podcast, and we did an audio-only escape room. It was really fun.
That was really cool.
Yeah, I highly sidebar, check out Escape This Podcast if you like a I guess it is kind of a D&D, but kind of a role-playing type escape room. It is really cool. Their show is fantastic. They had Neil Patrick Harris on one of their episodes, and that episode was fantastic. Wow. So check it out. Very, very cool. And I do social media very, very badly, but you can follow me at GameGuy2006 on Twitter if you like. I tweeted for the first time in 4 years, like last weekend. So you can follow me there if you want. I don't know, but at any rate. Yeah, that's all I had. We did record another episode about Stardew, like we talked about. Don't know when that one's going to come out. We did it before all of this COVID stuff, and we're like, do we really want to release this in the middle of all this tough stuff? Like, well, maybe not. And then all this other stuff started happening after that in America, and we're like, yeah, that's not a good time to release that either. We're just going to kind of sit on this for a minute, and so it'll come out eventually, whenever maybe timing is right, and things are a little more normalized, maybe, hopefully.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand that. I mean, all of my episodes, I took a very long hiatus when COVID hit, so I postponed all my episodes for a while. I mean, like, at the time of recording this, I haven't posted a new episode since, like, November. So it's been a while, but I've been kind of stockpiling so I can go back to releasing. So I'm kind of in a similar boat that you guys are in, but definitely understand that.
Well, good stuff, yeah.
Yeah, well, I very much appreciate you coming in and talking to me for a second time. We'll see about a third time. We'll have some talks, but
we have guests on our show too, so maybe we can look into getting you on and having maybe another follow-up Stardew episode or something. I don't know.
I would be happy to talk about Stardew. It is so much fun. Also, I'm sure we've talked about this before, but I have vast experience in all things nerdy. So Star Wars, video games, Harry Potter, you can bring me on for anything and I will have something to say about it.
Good stuff. Yeah, that'd be fun.
But yeah, no, so I definitely appreciate you taking the time to talk to me about this. I know that like you have a lot of stuff going on with your kids and everything, so is very, very kind of you to take time, a whole hour and a half to have discussions about robots and social media and all kinds of fun stuff.
The pleasure was all mine. It was a great a lot of fun. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. And I've definitely enjoyed our conversations the past couple weeks, talking about your episodes and my episodes and all that kind of stuff. It's been a lot of fun. So on that note, everyone go check out the Silly Mundane Things podcast. It's fantastic. I listen to it all the time while I'm working because it's very relaxing and soothing, and I'm looking forward to another episode because I've already listened to your episodes like twice. So
oh goodness, well thank you.
But yeah, no, it's a very good project, and I'm very happy to have stumbled upon it. So that's all I have for this episode. Thank everyone for tuning in, and don't forget, if you ate today, thank a farmer.
Bye.